1968, Mark 10. But let me rush, he says, to my conclusion because I want you to see what Jesus was really saying. What was the answer that Jesus gave to these men? It's very interesting. One would have thought that Jesus would have condemned them. One would have thought that Jesus would have said, you are out of your place. You are selfish. Why would you raise such a question? Who can be on the right and who can be on the left? But that isn't what he did. He did something altogether different, family. He said in substance, oh, I see you want to be first. You want to be great. You want to be important. You want to be significant. Well, you ought to be. If you're going to be my disciple, you must be. He reordered priorities. And he said, yes, don't give up this instinct. It's a good instinct if you use it right. Yes, it is a good instinct. If you don't distort it, if you don't pervert it, don't give it up. Keep feeling the need for being important. Keep feeling the need for being first. But I want you to be first in love. Have I got a witness? I want you to be first in moral excellence. I want you to be first in generosity. That is what I want you to do, James and John. And he transformed the situation by giving them a definition of greatness. And you know what he said, don't you? He said, brethren, I can't give you greatness. And really, I can't make you first. This is what Jesus said to James and John, the sons of Zebedee. He said, you got to earn it. True greatness then comes not from favoritism, but from fitness. And the right hand and the left hand are not mine to give. They belong to those who are prepared. And so Jesus gave us a new norm of greatness. That if you want to be wonderful, if you want to be recognized or wonderful, if you want to be wonderful, but recognize that he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. That's the definition of greatness. And this morning, the thing that I like to tell you about is by giving you the definition of greatness. It means that everybody can be great, everybody, because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You don't have to know about Plato and Aristotle to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics in physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul that has been generated by love. And yes, you can be that servant. I know a man. I just want to talk about him for a moment. And maybe you will discover who I'm talking about as I go down the way, because he was a great one. And he just went about serving. He was born in an obscure village, the child of a poor peasant woman. And then he grew up in still another obscure village where he worked as a carpenter until he was 30 years old. Then 3 years he just got on his feet, and he was an itinerant preacher, and he went about doing some things. He didn't have much. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never had a family. Yes, he never even owned his own home. He never even went to college. He never visited a big city. He never went 200 miles from where he was born. He did none of the usual things that the world would associate with greatness. He had no credentials but himself. He was only 33 when the tide of public opinion turned against him. They called him a rabble rouser. They called him a troublemaker. They said that he was an agitator. He practiced civil disobedience. He broke injunctions, and so he was turned over to his enemies and went through the mockery of a trial. And the irony of all of this is that his even friends turned him over to them. One of his closest friends, family, denied him. Another of his friends turned him over to his enemies. And while he was dying, the people who killed him gambled for his clothes, the only possession that he had in the world. When he was dead, he was buried in a borrowed tomb through the pity of a friend. And 19 centuries have come and gone, Dr. King says, and today he stands as the most influential figure that ever into human history. All of the armies ever marched, all of the navies that ever sailed, all of the parliaments that ever sat, all of the kings that ever reigned put together have not affected the life of man on this earth as much as the one solitary life. His name may be familiar, Jesus. But today I hear them talking about him. Every now and then somebody says he is King of Kings. And again, I hear somebody else saying he is Lord of Lords. Somebody else, I can hear somebody say, in Christ there is no east nor west. And then they can go on and talk about him. In him there is no north and no south, but one great fellowship of love throughout the whole wide world. He didn't have anything. He just went around serving and doing the work of his Father. This morning, I want you to know that you can be on the right hand or left hand if you serve. It's the only way in. And every now and then, I guess we all can think realistically about that day when we will be victimized with what life's final common denominator, that's something that we call death. We all think about it. And every now and then, I think about my own death. I think about my own funeral. I think about, and I don't think of it in a morbid sense, and every now and then I ask myself, why is it that I would want said at my funeral? And I leave this word to you today. If any of you around when I meet my day, if you've been there, if you show up, I don't want a long funeral. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, tell them not to talk too long. And every now and then I wonder what I want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That isn't important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards, because that's not important. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life to serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to say that day that I tried to be right on the question of racism and war. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. And I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and to serve humanity wholeheartedly. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace, that I was a drum major for righteousness, and all of the other shallow things will not matter. I won't have any money to leave behind. I won't have the fine and luxurious things of life to leave behind. But I just want to leave a committed life behind. That's all I want to say. If I can help somebody, I feel my help coming, church. As I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or a song, if I can show somebody he's traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a Christian ought, if I can bring salvation once wrought, if I can spread the message as the Master taught, then my living will not be in vain. Yes, Jesus, I want to be on your right or on your left, not for any selfish reason. I want to be on your right or your left side, not in terms of some political kingdom or ambition, but I just want to be there in love and in justice and in truth and in commitment to others, so that we can make of this old world